and we would like to introduce Ruth and Jurgen, who I met at the Market Bosworth Festival last summer, I think. Oh, that's better. I was wondering why I was shouting. Met Ruth and Jurgen at the Market Bosworth Festival. I was just absolutely loved what she did, and I even bought one of her paintings, which you can have a look at later.
That's beautiful.
And Ruth agreed to come and talk on one of our evenings. Apologies to those who turned up last week, but hopefully you've all come back. And there's even a bigger group this week. So without further ado, I shall welcome Ruth and Jurgen to share their story.
Okay. I must say, it's wonderful to be here, and I love the setting. Normally there's a stage and goodness knows what else. This is really my cup of tea, you know, sitting around comfortably and looking at people and they looking at me. And I hope at the end you will ask questions. Yeah? Anything, we're here just for one evening, we make ourselves available. Tonight I'm going to talk, or perhaps we're going to talk on the Holocaust. The Holocaust, the Shoah, it's known, yeah? And I'm taking you back to the 1930s, unfortunately. 1930s in Germany was not a good decade. I was born in 1935 in Germany. It wasn't a good year, but we'll go there and then we'll take you safely back to Colville. So please, I want to be back. I would love to be. My husband just met me going along there, and he said, "I've just signed us up for life members here in Colville." So I'm really pleased about that. We're going to go straight into this PowerPoint, and I've called this "The Heavens Wept" initially, but now I've changed it to "The Heavens Weep." If we think about all the atrocities that's going on now, the Ukraine and other places, Syria, it's not the heavens wept just for the Shoah, just for the Holocaust. The heavens weep now for what's going on. It's not a good time, is it? No. So there I've done a painting in acrylic, and the black is the tears of the heavens. I have tried to do my work in glass, because you'll see why later on. My parents never told us about their time in Germany. For them, it was taboo to tell the children. Yeah? So I've had to imagine their lives, not only imagine, we've got lots of letters from them and also archives. I built up the jigsaw. Life is a jigsaw, isn't it? A jigsaw of our lives, my parents' life, and through my work in glass and paintings. How I imagined their lives to be. I didn't have any, they didn't inform me about anything. I came over with a kinder transport at the age of 4, fostered, put in an orphanage, fostered, and didn't see my parents for some time. So they wanted, when they came over to England, they wanted to start their lives afresh. I think you'll all understand that. Let's move on to the next one, please. Here you see a little bit about, my name was Auerbach, and then it became Schwiening. I thought when I was young I wanted a simple name like Smith or Brown, but I ended up with Schwiening. Blame my husband. My grandmother's, Henrietta Auerbach, was deported from Breslau to Theresienstadt. Theresienstadt was a concentration camp. Yeah?
As well as a ghetto.
As well as a ghetto. Yeah, you'll find this is like the two Ronnies. No. When my husband speaks too much, I give him a little kick. Okay, so she went to Theresienstadt. You'll see a picture of her soon, I hope, if we've got the right PowerPoint. And the Laura Ring was deported to Theresienstadt. That's my mother's mother. So I never knew grandmothers. I never had grandmothers. When I became a grandmother, I didn't know how to behave. I went around in jogging trousers and trainers, and that's not what grandmas do, is it? So, also, she was in concentration camp at the age of 77. That is no age at all, is it now? The age of 77. Now, also, my aunt, Friederike Auerbach, that was my father's sister, was deported from Breslau. I was born in Breslau, which is now in Poland. We visited it not too long ago. And she died in a place unknown. Probably, we don't know, but there was no trace of her after the war. She was declared dead on the 8th of May, but we can imagine she was killed at the end. Yeah, she was the same age as my other grandmother. And I won't use the word died. I don't like to use euphemisms. Most of these people didn't just die, they were killed in one way or another. Yeah. Next one, please. There you see my aunt, a young woman in the heyday of her life. The heyday. She was 44 when she was taken away and deported to, we don't know exactly where. We've looked at archives, the Wiener Library, but we don't know. A beautiful young woman, her life was snuffed out by the Holocaust. Next one, please. They're the two grandmothers. Did they know, they're pretty well dressed, jewellery, had they known that one day they might be driven from their home, their flats, and driven by probably cattle truck to a concentration camp, dressed in rags, had they known that, they might have, as many others did, committed suicide. That might have been an easier way out for them, but they didn't know. Next one, please. This is a painting I did. And when I was university, a bit later than that, I decided I had to know something about being Jewish. It was very important to me. Have any of you met Jewish people before? Just put your hand up, please. Yeah, we don't look any different, do we? We've got two eyes, we've got a nose. When we cut ourselves, we bleed. When somebody says hurtful things to us, we cry. Yeah? We're just the same. We're not all normal people. And this then is the menorah. The menorah is 7 candles or 8 candles, and it's very important to the Jews. And I have a menorah. I didn't inherit much from my parents at all, but I did inherit a menorah, and I treasure that. We put candles on it, Hanukkah, and instead of the candles, which mean joyful candles at Christmas, candles at birthday, I put people. Yeah, people, and I think the picture speaks for itself. People, girls, women, boys, men, and they were not flames of joy, but flames of death. That's why I decided to put people there on, and it was done in acrylic. Underneath you see the tabernacle, and that's the world there. The world which didn't want us Jews. Didn't want us, but why? Anyway, let's move on. This is a picture, and probably I did this in glass, and it is a picture of my parents in love. 1930 in Germany. Earlier than that, they were, first of all, good friends. My father studied at Breslau University. He wanted to be a doctor, but he didn't achieve that. And so he decided instead to go to farming. And he was a farmer in Breslau, and that is where they met. So this is probably my favourite picture, showing the love between them. Yeah? One in glass, one's got the arm around the other. Let's go on to the next one, please. This is the farm, the first farm that they actually, my father built that farm, and I think I'm going to ask Jurgen to say a few words about this picture.
All right, now then.
Not too many.
Ruth's father decided that he, because he could not study medicine, because he didn't have the Abitur,
Can you hear at the back?
Yeah.
that he would go to university in Breslau, where he lived, and study agriculture. At that time, and we're talking here about the 20s, many Jews, probably most Jews in Germany, in Austria, and in other countries, realized that their future was in peril. Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism, that was already there and still with us. So there were movements quite strong in the 20s in Germany for young people to emigrate to Palestine. Palestine was then a British mandate, and Britain, the government, was not too keen to allow too many Jews into their area, where, of course, problems with the Muslim Arab population would get worse. However, he did want to emigrate, and well, Ruth's father wanted to emigrate as well, and he actually went to Palestine for a few months. Unfortunately, he caught malaria, which they couldn't treat, and so he was sent home, and he came back to Breslau. But the movement for young people to emigrate was strong, and Jewish organizations, welfare organizations, supported this financially. And they were looking for someone just like Lothar's parents, Ruth's parents, Lothar and Hilde, who would train young people in practical, particularly in agricultural skills, which is what these people, young people, needed. Luckily, at that time, Germany in the 20s was still a democracy and was still acting in the interests of all people, including Jews. They supported the division of large neglected estates in East Germany and make them available to people who wanted to set up farming in Germany. Jews or not Jews, didn't matter. So Lothar and his wife Hilde got involved in this, and eventually it was agreed that they would give a loan to the Auerbachs to buy some land near Breslau and start farming, and then to train young people to go to Palestine. So that is where the Auerbachs' desire to be farmers and the need of the day of getting young Jewish people out of Germany and provide them with the necessary knowledge and skills.
Yes, so they were very happy here. Yeah, they built their own farm, and in 1933, my brother was born, and 1935, I was born and had a twin brother. Yeah, so what could be better? Positive, yes, they did see certain clouds on the horizon, but as many Germans did, they thought these clouds would pass by and things would normalize themselves. And here I just have to mention very quickly, go back in time. And we must, Hitler wrote a book. Does anybody know the name of it?
Mein Kampf.
Mein Kampf. Great. You know your history. I have to be careful. Mein Kampf. And in that book, Mein Kampf, he wrote quite clearly, in 1922 or 23, he wrote quite clearly what he wanted to do with these Jews. He wanted to have a pure race of Aryans in the country. He wanted to get rid of the Jews. That was already in 1925. We're now moving on to 1933. 1933, he declared that no Jew was to own land or to own a farm. My parents had that. So they managed to, because they were out in the sticks, they managed to stay on their farm with the children until 1936. 1936, their existence was taken away from them. It became quite clear to my parents then that Germany had very little to offer them, as indeed many other Jews. But 1933, 1935, 1936, it might have been possible for some people to emigrate. Yeah? Although the persecution of the Jews had already started, the people who were far-sighted decided they might be able to emigrate early. My parents weren't amongst them. So now, in 1936, their existence taken away from them, all the persecution, doctors, dentists, civil servants were all made without a job. No existence for them. Jews became second-class citizens. Their statesmanship, and this was a step-by-step. It didn't happen all immediately. It was just a step-by-step existence, taking away various things. Taking away children from schools. Now imagine if you've got a child at the school. The child comes home and says to the mummy or daddy, I'm not allowed to go to that school anymore. And the child doesn't know why. The child comes past a park and sees perhaps a sign or hears, no Jews allowed to sit here, no Jews allowed to go swimming, no Jews allowed to go into the parks. What do you tell your child? What do you tell your child? It's a question that I'm asking you to think about. Yeah?
Shall I just say a word about immigration?
Let's leave that until, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Let's move on, please. Yes, there's so much we would like to tell you, and time seems to be so short, really. Maybe we could come back some other time, because there's so much, really, that happens after we came to England as refugees. Here is a picture. I never knew anything about my childhood, where I was born, what it was like. We all like to think back, don't we? And, when my husband or a friend says, yes, this is the house where I was born, or this is the area where I was born, I'm very quiet, because I have nothing to say. I've seen the house on postcards, but only on postcards. And one day I said, I want to be like everybody else. I want to go and see the place where I was born, or near there. And this is the house then. I painted in acrylics. Next one, please. Here my father, you see my father, the guy with the hat on there in the middle looking down. Yeah? He's got leg warmers on as well. I haven't noticed that before. There he is then, a proud man. And he's there together with his men, and these young men are being trained to go to Palestine, which is now, of course, you all know is Israel, yeah? So he taught them. And next one, please, you'll soon see another one. There's my father as a young man, a handsome young man with my brother on the horse, yeah? He was happy. He was happy. He realized his dream. Nothing could go wrong, he thought. But remember, he was Jewish. But was he Jewish? He was German. He was German first and foremost. He was German, not Jewish. Although recently we've been reading some letters, and up till now we haven't realized how Jewish he actually was. You read in between the lines, and we know he was Jewish as well as, but mainly German. If somebody asks you, what you are, you will say British.
Yes.
You won't say Christian or Muslim, you'll say British, won't you? Same as my parents said German. Somebody asks me what I am, I'll say British. Next one, please. Now, these are the 3 young men who were taught to go to how to get knowledge of the land and go to Palestine. And this one with the braces, I love him. He is, he must have been, Gerhard, yes. He must have been about 15, 16, perhaps not quite that age. And he actually followed my father to Austria, where they went eventually. We got in touch with his, how did you get in touch with him?
Sister.
Yeah, with his sister, and she was in Israel. And we sent an electronic picture, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, and said, do you know this young guy? And she wrote back, I could imagine her in tears, and she said, yes, that was my brother. And I know now how happy he was working together with my father. What happened to him, and she said this is a mitzvah. Now a mitzvah in Hebrew means a blessing. And she said, I can die in peace now because I know that my brother was happy. We don't know what happened to him at the end. We know that he accompanied my father to Austria and he worked for a time there. Let's move on then. Now, I said I work in glass. That is one of my pieces there. And this shows when they moved, had to move because their existence had been taken away from them, their house was in chaos. And I don't know how familiar you are with Chagall. I love the painter Chagall. It's dreamlike figure, colours, and even though it's sad what you want to express, you can express it in the colours, yeah? And each colour will have a meaning. Now you notice I've done with that a house in the air, a cow, because he loved his cows, a cow going off the picture, and usually a boat, because I came over on a boat, the Kindertransport and a boat. So my pictures usually have these things on them. A bird, usually a menorah, and a boat. Next one, please. Here it tells you a little bit. I'm not expecting you to read all those, but remembering it is a step by step persecution of the Jews and their rights taken away from them. 19, I would like you to look at this was the entailed farm law, states that only German citizens of German blood can be farmers. Yeah, my father was a farmer. Yeah. Farmers were considered the bloodspring of the folk, Blut und Boden, blood and earth. 1933. They managed to stay on their farm in Estorf until 1936. Can you see the screen?
Does Volt mean folk, does it?
People.
Does it mean folk, people, Volt?
Folk, yes,
like Volkswagen,
people, yeah.
I think, yeah.
People can't.
Jewish law students at university excluded from examination. Yeah? Let's move on to the next one, because the next one is all Jewish children excluded from state schools. Do you want to mention something about that? Usually you say the percentage.
Well, yes, I want to emphasize that the Hitler regime took great care to clad most of their measures into legal form. They did not want to appear to be a group of ruffians who just threw about their weight. But therefore, we stress the fact here that the measures taken against Jews were mainly, though not only, clad in legal forms. Laws passed by the Reichstag, the parliament, where, of course, all opposition parties had long been excluded. They had been forced to dissolve themselves and say, well, we have no place in the new Germany, the socialists and the liberals and the Christians Democrats had to declare, we now all follow the NSDAP, the National Socialist Party. Anyway, so the legal form nevertheless has a certain weight in the eyes of the public. And also the other main factor that you want to keep in mind is that steps against Jews were taken gradually, one after the other. At certain times, measures against Jews were suspended. For example, during the Olympic Games 1935 in Berlin, all references to discrimination of Jews, like on park benches, only, no Jews here and so on, were removed to give the attending young people from all over the world the impression, well, all this thing we've been reading about the oppressive regime is just so much propaganda. Here we are in Berlin, there's no sign of any anti-Semitism or any kind of oppression. That is what the Germans want, and that's what they are doing. So, the step-by-step legal sessions. Now, as far as the Auerbachs were concerned, already since 1935, they were legally no longer allowed to own land because of the Nazi policy of blood and soil, that the strength of the Aryan race comes from the soil, and therefore the people who look after the land, the soil, the farms are the real Germans, and the Jews have, just because they have money, bought themselves into this. As far as this anti-Semitism is concerned, it is as old as 2,000 years. We are, in our history, a Christian country, and part of what is now resurfacing again comes from anti-Jewish sentiments within the Christian churches. But the other element, of course, was racism. Racist ideas in the 19th and 20th century were very popular. It was widely believed that you could divide humanity like you divide animals, cows or dogs, into races which you, of course, look after. You breed certain races and you suppress others. So the racists said that is the rational thing to do with human beings. We must suppress the weak members of society and those that are not part of us.
Can I interrupt now?
So
because
the step-by-step. Right, okay, carry on. Carry on.
Right, I'm glad that you're so relaxed about this that we can smile. We must smile, mustn't we? Because that's part of life, part of living. What I wanted to do, can we just go back one, please? Right, now what I wanted to do is for you to look at the main thing that really upsets me. And I think it would upset you as well. The Nuremberg laws. Full citizenship restricted to people of German blood. Marriages between Jews and Aryans are forbidden. I'm a Jew. My husband would be classed as an Aryan. Had we wanted to get married in that time, it would have been forbidden. Why? What is that all about? This is one of the laws that hit me hardest, I think, to forbid lovers to live together and to marry and to be happy together. So that is in Nuremberg laws, and also the removal of citizenship. If you are no longer a citizen of the country, you are nothing. You have no means to exist. You can't vote, you can do nothing at all. You've got no money. Full citizenship taken away from Jews. But now I mention Jews, and it makes me very much aware that there were not only the Jews who were persecuted, there were we call them gypsies. I don't like that name. It's derogative. We mustn't. The Romani people. That's in future. if we're talking about this group of people, let's call them Romani. Yeah? Okay, let's move on then. No, I wanted just to mention, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking at notes or anything, I'm just talking free because that's the way we do it. Hitler Youth, when you were boys were the age of 10, they had to join the Hitler Youth. Now, Jurgen lived in Germany at that time, and for a very short time, he was a member of the Hitler Youth. The Hitler Youth, the young boys of 10, were indoctrinated and I'm quoting now, part of what's said in the laws, eternally hate the Jews. Eternally hate the Jews. Young boys of 10 were ordered to do that.
Actually, if I could just add that, because it is in a way quite funny. I don't remember any of that indoctrination. This was already in the last years of the war. The war ended in May 45, and I had to go to the Jungvolk, which was the junior branch of the Hitler Youth, from February 1945 on. Anyway, but what I I do remember vividly is that we had to learn to laugh. Now you won't believe this, but there was, we were in a room and there was one older member of the Hitler Youth there at the front, and he told us jokes, which me, being very immature, I didn't understand at all. However, that was not the point. We didn't have to understand the jokes. But on a signal, we had to learn to laugh. And there were two ways we were allowed to laugh. One was all to burst out into ha after the joke was finished, or ha ha ha. Those were the two ways you were allowed to laugh. So I remember this. It's absolutely ludicrous, but that has stuck in my memory. The other thing was learning to march. And if you've ever been in the Boy Scouts or any army or wherever marching goes on, you know that the hardest bit about marching is when you have to march around a bend. When the inside people have to take shorter steps or the wider steps, and also the distance. So I remember that. I'm just telling you to lighten the atmosphere a bit here. That one of the older guys shouted at me and others from time to time something that I took to mean Tuchfühlung. Tuch is cloth, and fühlen is to feel. So there was something wrong with, well, I worked out the distance between you and the next guy, that you had to march by just about touching the cloth of so this word Tuchfühlung, which I'd never heard before, and I'm understood to be Tuchfühlung, a foreign word for all that was shouted at us. Anyway, so that was my experience in the Hitler Youth. Thank you.
Okay. Told you it's like the two Ronnies. Right, now, oh, that's
pretty.
one.
That's pretty.
That's not one.
Looks like,
We lost the trail.
We've lost,
like America.
lost it.
Oh dear.
While you're sorting that out, I will just. When Ruth said her parents told her very little about their life in Germany and Austria, that is certainly true. The main source which I used was Ruth's mother's record keeping.
Yes.
She was an assiduous record keeper. She kept albums of
Good.
photos, and as you know, sometimes when people make
yeah.
albums, they
I'll
forget
get her this.
to write underneath where and when and who. But she always wrote underneath who it was, when it was, where it was.
Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
her record keeping, she
What's
kept
your
old
mouth?
letters and documents in a case which probably they'd not looked at for decades, but I inherited those. So it's thanks to Ruth's mother's care to document their life that I've been able to work out.
I think that's
Long
how we
things.
put the jigsaw of my life together. It was mainly, I have an idea now what happened, And it's mainly, and I must say quite sincerely, that it's thanks to Jurgen. He spent hours, he spent years finding out what happened to my life. And really it is Jurgen's hard work that's done that I can actually stand here today and tell you some details of my life. Then my parents, realizing that life in Germany wasn't for them anymore. But my father was very positive. He thought this would all blow over. After time, we will be able to get back to Germany and be able to be with the parents and with the friends and with everything. The culture was very important to my mother. Books were so much, meant so much to her. But, and they decided then, Austria. That we think that they chose Austria because it was on the border of Germany, and also the language was the same. They found a farm, again, far away from anywhere, in Austria, and they bought it. How they bought it, I don't know. We think that my uncle gave them some money. And also they had some money from the farm that they sold.
Yeah.
So this farm was pretty, yes. Why they went to Austria, of course, I've forgotten to mention, so important, that Austria was an independent country. Yeah. So they thought, yes, okay, it's independent. What's happening in Germany won't happen in Austria. But in actual fact, what happened in Germany happened in Austria, even worse. Anti-Semitism was rife with a big R. They took it more seriously than perhaps the Germans did. And now my parents were in Austria on the farm, very positive people. Would we have been so positive? I often try to think what I might have done had I been in the shoes of my parents. I don't know. And so they went to Austria and they bought this farm, Pulsel. There my mother and Peter my brother at the pump. You can't see that very well. It's a very old photograph. I'm standing in the middle, so. The other picture shows you my mother in the middle and two ladies who probably helped her in the house. Yeah, and then we three children are at the front. And probably, I think I'm the one with the muff, I think.
Of course you are.
Oh, of course I am. Okay, I'm the one, I'll say it more positive. Do you mind holding
Together with Mike, yeah.
And Michael is, my twin, is next to me. Peter is at the back. Now, we have numerous pictures, photos of my parents when they lived in the other farm in Estorf. This is probably the last picture, and very, very few pictures of the farm here and of us children. Why? We couldn't work out, first of all, why there are so few pictures of that place. And then we suddenly realised, reflecting on when we take photographs and when you take photographs, you take photographs when you're happy, don't you? You don't take photographs when you're sad or feeling ill or feeling off colour. You take photographs when you're happy. And this is probably the last photograph of us as a family. My father isn't there, he might have taken a photograph. Let's move on to the next one, please. That is myself. Yes, what happens between then and now? Perhaps they call it age, I don't know. I hope you are photographing and taking all the wrinkles out.
I will do.
So that is me and my twin brother, Michael. Yeah? Probably one of the last photographs taken before we have to leave. Next one, please. Now this is the house. Again, it's a place I wanted to see. not too recently, about, oh yes, we've been there last year. I wanted to see
Been there
this
3
place.
times now.
3 times. When we went there, though, the first time, before we went, something very interesting happened. The people were really worried about us coming over. The same with the other farm in Poland. They were really worried. Can you imagine why?
You thought you were going to reclaim it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They thought
Yeah.
we would come to reclaim it. We had no such intention, but they were worried. In the meantime, we went this year or last year, and we're still in touch with the younger generation there, and everything is smooth running there. Of course, we weren't going to reclaim it. We just wanted to try and rekindle a memory of mine which was lost. Yeah. So this is the farm, beautiful farm now, and let's move on to the next one, please. This is when the catalyst happened. The program of 9th and 10th of November, the Kristallnacht. Crystal, sounds beautiful. It is beautiful. I haven't got any, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know. You hold it up to the light and it shines, doesn't it? It's all beautiful colours and the sun comes through it. It's not like that at all. The night of the crystal, the night of the broken glass. There we are. Let's move on, please. I did a picture, acrylic picture, how I imagined the Kristallnacht to be. And when I did this picture, I did it in a fury. I chucked paint at it. I used my palette knife. I used a knife. I used colours. To me, it was an expression of what was in my heart and what was in my soul. And these things stay with you. Yeah? I was angry. Of course I was angry. Because this, the Kristallnacht, was the night which changed the whole of my life, the whole of my parents' life, the whole of thousands, millions of people's lives, not only Jews, Romani and various other people, people who were disabled, euthanized. Of course I was angry. Let's move on. And if you looked at that picture, it looks joyful, it looks a great picture, doesn't it? Fireworks, happy times, but to me it means a lot more than that. Next one, please. Oh no, this one. Here you see the burning synagogues. On the Kristallnacht, the night after the Kristallnacht, synagogues were burned, people were thrown down the stairs with the wheelchairs, men were driven out on the streets, hair was shaven off the men, beards were shaven off, they were given small brushes in which to clean the roads, and people stood by. And these are the bystanders who saw but didn't help. We are, the motto of this year's Jewish memorial is ordinary people. How far were ordinary people involved in what happened in Germany in the 1930s? Ordinary people were involved, the bystanders as well, when they saw and spat at the men who were kneeling on the streets outside, cleaning the street. Right, next one, please. This, I'm not going to show you concentration camps or anything like that, but this is a picture of, my father was taken after Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. There was a knock on the door and at the farm, and my father, somebody stood there and said, "Are you the Jew Auerbach? Not are you Mr. Auerbach, are you the Jew Auerbach?" My father said, "Yes, come with us." And they put him on a lorry and took him away. He had no time to say, to kiss his children, to say shalom to his wife. No time. They just took him. His wife, my mother, didn't know where they were taking him. Had no idea. She didn't even know whether she would see him again. Imagine that.
These, of course, are official photos taken by the, as published in the news.
Yes, these are. When I look at that one, I often think, well, is my father amongst them? Because my father was taken to Dachau concentration camp, where he stayed for 6 weeks. Now you think 6 weeks is a very short time. You be in a concentration camp for 6 weeks and you don't come out of it as the man you went in, guaranteed, and neither did my father. Let's move on to the next one, please. This is the Germans are very meticulous in keeping details. This is the layout of the concentration camp in Dachau, the concentration camp my father was in. And here it shows you exactly the bunks the men slept in. Slept is a great word, isn't it?
What about that?
Yes.
This information is from the archive at Dachau, which is near München in Germany. And we also know from this archive that Lothar's father, that Ruth's father, I always get that wrong, sorry, Ruth's father, Lothar, had to wear 2 triangles on his outer jacket. Every inmate there had to be identified by what group he belonged to. And the 2 triangles he had to wear here, one was a triangle which showed him as Jewish. I think it was yellow. And the other one, and that is the interesting bit, the addition, was a triangle showing that he was a socialist. And those 2 were superimposed. So the Nazi system was felt it necessary not only to say this man is singled out for harsh treatment and will be expelled if he doesn't go by himself because he's Jewish, but also because he's a socialist.
They had to have an
The
excuse.
first inmates of Dachau were not Jews at all, but in January 1933, when Hitler came to power, when socialists were persecuted and expelled from parliament and put into a concentration camp like this. So the first inmates of this concentration camp were communists, socialists, and liberals who were in support of the democratic Weimar Republic, the enemies of Hitler. Of course, some of them were Jews, as one would expect, but it is important that the measures against Jews, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses at the time would not have been possible had not the opposition, namely the left opposition around the Social Democratic Party, had first been eliminated. That was the way to push them out of mainstream politics and declare everyone, whether he was a liberal or socialist or communist, to be an enemy of the new Germany.
Right, okay. Let's move on then, please. Now, this again is a piece of glass. As I said, my parents didn't tell me anything at all. I once asked my father, and I remember this as though it was yesterday, and it still hurts. It all hurts, actually, and then, you know, your memory, as you get older, you begin to think more about what happened in the past. And this is in glass. Whilst in Dachau concentration camp, my father wrote to my mother saying, I can work, can't I? They could send cards. My father wrote 3 cards in concentration camp. I did this piece of work in the shape of a woman because I don't think women are given enough credit for having helped their husbands, their brothers, their uncles, their sons, whilst they're in concentration camp. They didn't. not enough credit on the whole has been given to them. Yes, we're getting it now, their involvement, of course. So I thought I'd do it in the shape, and women were taken out to concentration camps as well. We mustn't forget that. And here I did a woman with broken glass, broken pieces there, because I worked in glass. Why did I work in glass? I worked in glass because glass shatters. Glass is fragile. Love is fragile. Life is fragile. So I thought the best thing, it all shatters, it all explodes, as it did with my parents. So I thought this is the best way of working in telling my parents' story. Right, next one please. Again, this is in glass. Here I did a skull, yeah, a skull, and it takes the young lady there works in glass. You will understand. It's not easy. Sometimes it takes 3 firings, and each firing, if you open the kiln too soon, it shatters. Yeah, like life can, like my parents' life did. Yeah. Let's go on to the next one. Here, when my father was taken from concentration camp, my mother had no idea what was happening, and she looked out of the window the next day and she saw her pet dog had been shot. So I just had to represent this with a lead that is broken. How do you tell? How do you tell your children? How do you tell your children why your dog is lying on the ground not moving? How do you? How do you tell your children where their father has gone when he's disappeared? I think we need to think about these things. Yes, it's a hypothetical question, and let's hope it will never happen again. But we have to think about these things. Let's move on to the next one, please. My father, when he was on the way to prison, why did he go to prison? From his farm, they took him to prison. Why did they take him to prison? An innocent man who'd done nothing, who'd harmed nobody. Why did they take him to prison? Because he was a Jew. That's why. Okay, so here he writes, mention your handicap. I didn't mention this, that my mother had polio when she was a young woman, and this incapacitated her with walking. So this is another thing that we have to think about. Here's a woman hardly being able to walk, with 3 little children to look after, husband in the concentration camp. What now? Situation in Austria equal to the situation in Germany, getting worse and worse. What now? So that's the card, and he says, and ask for my release. Ask for my release. Right, next one, please. You're allowed to send cards. You were allowed to send cards, and of 10 lines. Of course, they were censored. So when he writes, "I'm okay," that's probably after a beating on the courtyard in the morning. One of the punishments, if you move or if you don't do something correctly, you stand there for 24 hours and flogged or something. I'm not going to go into that. Address it to me correctly, and kisses from your loving Lothar, Dachau, the 19th of November. We have these cards. They're so important, aren't they? And they will go to an archive, I hope, either to my children, if our children want them, but otherwise to Bet Shalom, the Holocaust Museum, or somewhere in our archive. And this is then his card he wrote. And also, take the double plough in. This shows how he worked on the land and how he loved his farm. He was taken away in the winter and drain the water. Get somebody to drain the water out of the tractor. Next one, please. I'm very worried since I'm so far without news. He hopes everything's all right. Now, he's telling his wife, contact Moster or Finn immediately, be able to stay there until you get the permit. Prepare everything for the sale, even if the price is low. And in the meantime, when my father was taken to concentration camp, 2 weeks afterwards, the official came to my mother and said, or wrote a letter and said, you've got to leave the farm.
We've got the document coming up.
Sorry? Yeah, okay. You've got to leave the farm, take everybody who is Jewish with you, that is 3 children, and go to Vienna. My mother was a very clever woman, very astute. She thought, had she gone to Vienna, I wouldn't be standing here.
No.
I would have probably ended up in Auschwitz or a concentration camp. Here I am, though, right? Due to my mother. And instead of going to Vienna, which was the hub of the Jews, and most of them then were, we know what that means, transported. We know what that means. And she went to Berlin. She went to Berlin, where she had relations and friends. In the meantime, though, there were 3 children, a woman all on her own, husband in concentration camp.
Take the next slide. You've got the
Take
slide.
the next slide. Next slide, please.
Brilliant.
That is the expulsion order, yeah? In the meantime, yeah, look at the date. If you move to Vienna, you must report on your arrival to the appropriate police station. By order of the state police in Klagenfurt, we have to inform you that you and your family, insofar as they are Jews, have to emigrate. No country wanted us. No country wanted little Ruth. No country wanted this brave woman. Why? Well, several reasons why they didn't want her. It's the same as in England, isn't it, when we think of the Poles who came over. We didn't really want them because we thought that they would take away our houses. We thought that they would take away our jobs. We thought that they rape our children.
Mm-hmm. But
Yeah.
also you need to say that nobody was allowed to emigrate from Germany at this time without having disposed of all their assets. They had to sell their houses if they had any, sell their business if they had any, sell all their possessions, their furniture, pay their taxes, settle every debt. The local police station had to certify that there was no case pending of any kind against the person who wanted to emigrate. So the German government, while they wanted Jews to emigrate, to get out wherever, made it very hard, actually, for people to do that. And the people who got out first out of Germany in the early 30s were people who had connections abroad, or who had jobs that were desirable, who were scientists or artists, or had enough money, friends abroad who would speak for them. In fact, the kind of people who were left by this time were poor or old Jews, older Jews, poorer Jews, who did not have enough money to pay for example, the very expensive passage to Shanghai. Shanghai was a kind of international entity at the time which allowed Jews from Germany to emigrate. But the authorities required that those who wanted to emigrate had to pay also for the return journey. And a ticket from Hamburg, say, to Shanghai was extremely expensive. And those, like one of Ruth's uncles, who managed to emigrate to Shanghai in the middle 30s, had to pay for the return journey, money which of course they never got back. So it was the poorer, not well-connected Jews or weaker people, sick people, women, single people and so on, who were left eventually to face the Holocaust.
Also, whilst my father was in concentration camp, sorry, and my mother was given the order to go to Vienna, and she decided no, she wouldn't go to Vienna, she would go to Berlin. The Jewish organisation, who were, before that I need to very quickly say, you saw the fire in the synagogues, yeah?
Yes.
You saw the destruction, you heard about the destruction. Who was to blame for that? Who was to blame for setting the synagogues, throwing people down, killing, murdering people? Who was to blame?
Brown shirts.
Pardon?
Hitler, brown shirts.
Who did they think that the Hitler's troop blamed? The Jews.
Oh.
The Jews, of course, were responsible for all this, they said. And they had to pay fines, they had to pay a lot of money because the Jews were responsible. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Anyway, whilst my father was in concentration camp, the Jewish organisation somehow contacted my mother and said, "You've got 3 children, Hilda." My mother's name was Hilda. "We will help you. Because you have your husband in concentration camp, you will have the privilege. You are privileged. We will help you. We will take 1 child, and we can only take 1 child, and we will take that child to on the Kindertransport. The Kindertransport, England did. We don't think it's that wonderful, but at least they did promise to take 10,000 children to England, yeah, and keep them safe. Which child, now, Hilda, my mother thought, how would you say, which child, you've got 3 children and you love them equally, which child, you have to make Solomon's choice, which child do you give up, knowing in your mind that you might never see that child again? What do you pack when you send this child away? Anyway, let's move on. They said, well, we'll take the girl, that is me. We'll take her and she will then go on the Kindertransport, the children's transport, and we will take her with us to England. But first of all, she'll have to go into an orphanage. So I was put in an orphanage. I was taken away from my mother, taken away from my brothers, and put in an orphanage for a time, and travelled then to England on the Kindertransport. We haven't got much time to tell you about the Kindertransport, but let's go on. My father's card from Dachau was forwarded to my mother in Berlin. Yeah, you wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
the stipulation from the government regarding the inmates of Dachau and Buchenwald and other concentration camps in Germany, not those in Poland. We're talking of the war hadn't started yet, don't forget. So we're talking about those concentration camps in Germany. The Kristallnacht, so-called, was arranged in order to put maximum pressure on Jews to get out, to give a signal, you must make somehow make arrangements to get out of the country. The only way, a legal only way, was to get a visa that allows you to enter another country, an entrance visa from another government. Most governments had quota systems, like America. Most Jews wanted to go to America because that was where it was thought there were the best opportunities for starting a new life. There were no special quotas for Jews. There were quotas for Austrians, for Germans, for Czechs, for Poles, and so on. And people got a number, say, from America, saying, well, on the quota system, you will be able to emigrate in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, which of course was no use to anybody, really. Luckily, the head of the visa section in London of the British Embassy was a man who happened to be also a member of MI5, as indeed many staff on embassies are, that's fairly common. Frank Foley was his name. And he had good contacts with the Jewish leaders of communities, various communities in Germany, and issued visas at his own peril, so to speak, in very generous interpretation of the laws laid down by the British government, which wanted to keep the numbers down and allow only people who had desirable jobs or enough money or whatever, friends to speak for them. Frank Foley and his staff were issuing thousands of visas to German and Austrian Jews who wanted to either emigrate to Palestine or to Britain itself. And Ruth's mother was lucky to get a visa for her husband and for herself while he was still in Dachau to come to Britain. So it's thanks to the humanity of a man like Frank Foley, who took the risk of interpreting the laws under which he worked very generously. And it was also a Member of Parliament, Noel Baker, who was a Labour Member of Parliament, who requested the government, the British government, that they should allow unaccompanied children, minors, Ruth was one of them, to Britain without an individual visa. So Ruth came in on a collective visa of so many hundred children who were brought into Britain, and many of them, not all, but many found foster homes in families, Christian, non-Christian, Jewish, and whoever. And it was particularly the Quakers who were extremely active in this field, but also many local churches, where as officialdom was hesitant, we don't really want Jews, and we don't want certainly not too many, but local churches, among them mainly the Quakers and others. Anyway, it's thanks to these people that Ruth is here and that her parents got out.
But it wasn't as generous as we think. It wasn't. The people who, firstly, getting a visa, you know, the Ukrainians, they have to get visas. You think they just go to the counter and there they are, officialdom there and saying, yeah, I want a visa. It doesn't work like that. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks. And in the meantime, people are hungry. People are dying on the streets. People are in tents. What are we doing? And at that time, the people who wanted to foster me and wanted to foster other children had to pay a sum of £50. Now that £50 was a lot of money at that time, yeah? And why was the money there? To make sure that they, when things had settled in Germany, they could go back again. It was a kind of deposit, yeah? So it wasn't quite as it seems to be. It wasn't quite as rosy and as well-meaning as we think that the British were. There were also difficulties when the child went along the street and knocked on the door and said to somebody there, will you get a visa for my mother? Or for my father, not for my father so much, but for my mother or for my little sister, went begging. It was not that easy. So anyway, where are we now? We are here, the card went to Berlin, and then we always think that people are kept in concentration camps. No, they weren't. The German Reich there, what they wanted was to get the Jews and others, Romani and others, out of the country. This idea of a gas chamber wasn't really in play at that time. So they had a conference at Wannsee, the Wannsee conference, and that is when they decided, yeah, the Jews aren't getting out of the country quick enough, we'll have to do something. And that is when the extermination of so many Jews, so many Romani, so many different handicapped people or disabled people took place. That is, and we always think, yes, okay, they were all gassed. No, they weren't all gassed. They were shot. They were taken into the forest. Ditches were dug, and they were shot, and they fell into the ditch. Okay, let's move on, please. Here is a startling picture of how Christians helped my parents. People in the next farm helped my parents to get out. They came to my mother and said, look, we'll help you, Hilda. How can you help me? Yeah, well, we're neighbours. We'll get a horse and cart and we will take you to the next station and then you can get a train to Berlin. And we'll cover you, put you in the cart and maybe the boys as well, and we'll take you to the station and we'll cover you with straw and we'll drive you there and then you can go on your way. Okay? And that there were good people. We can't think that all Germans were bad at that time. There were people who were willing to help. Right, next one please. This is the one I've brought here. This is in glass, 3 firings. Do you do yours in 3 firings? 3 firings, and the idea of the figure that is driving the Jews and other people out of the country. That is the figure there is Germany. Okay, next one please. Here again I have something about women not being credited enough for their help. Here I've painted the picture of women waiting day and night, night and day for a visa to get their their husbands out of the country. And this one is in a big canvas, much bigger than that, which my daughter's got now. Right, next one please. Yes, we have the passports of my father, and there you notice on the passport there's a big J, yeah? And this was for officials to know if they go somewhere important, they always have to carry their passport and they know that they were Jews. And also the name, men had to take a middle name, Israel, and in between, because it didn't, if they didn't have a name which indicated they were Jewish, they had to then have the name Israel put in the middle. And the women had to have the name Sarah, put in the middle, and immediately the official people standing there would know that they were Jewish and act accordingly. Right, next one please. I did this in chalk and charcoal. My upside down world, the dreams of a happy life in Germany were destroyed. Yeah, I did it in chalk and charcoal on paper, and there it shows a figure upside down, the menorah upside down, the bird upside down, the violin, no, the violin, music is something for pleasure, isn't it? No more music, the violin is broken. Right, next one please. Turbulence. My parents' lives had been turbulent, but they weathered the storm. They came to England, we met up again, I don't know if this is the last one, we met up again in England eventually. Next one please. A broken tree, a broken life. I did this in chalk and charcoal. Grandmother, my grandmother, I don't know what became of her. So I did a picture of how I imagine. It's funny, isn't it? My mother never taught, neither did my father, talk about his parents or her parents. Never described them to me or what they did or how they looked, really. Which is a shame, isn't it, if this isn't done. Next one, please. Freedom. They got to England. to a country where they didn't ask about your religion. Yeah? They didn't ask if are you Jewish? Yeah? They just accepted, in a way, they accepted us as we were. And
At
as
that
we are.
time, it was more of a handicap to be German than to be Jewish.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I'd like you to imagine that.
Yes.
We are now, not now, but then, in a country which we are fighting. So, it wasn't an easy time for my parents. I've got a little green book there which was brought out for the Jews when they came over, refugees, which I was, very poor. People can't imagine that now. Very poor and very we didn't have a home. My mother came over without my father with one suitcase. A bit like the Ukrainians doing now. I gave a little talk to show them. My daughter has hosted Ukrainians, and I showed the lady a picture, and she burst out into tears, and she said, "This is just what we're experiencing now." And anyway, so they were freedom. We were, as children. The story goes on, but we're not going to talk anymore about this, because a lot more goes on about what does a refugee do? How do they manage in the country? How did my parents manage to exist? How did they manage to exist? How did they manage to forge a life for 3 little children? What kind of job, if they could get a job? How did they get the money? And then the story goes on even further, but this is all another story. How does a German Aryan wed a Jewish girl? What kind of life do they lead after in Britain? There is a story above a story above a story, which you all have stories to tell. If only you would write them down or tell your children. It's so important to tell your children about it, even if they don't ask. Tell them about what you did. You know, even if you think it's mundane, it's not. So we all have stories to tell. And also, we do need to contact our children more often, and they need to contact us, yeah? And say, this happened to me. Yeah, my mum didn't have a washing machine. She had to do her washing in the sink. That is an important thing. And I think we all know a little bit about that, to relay back to your children. And one more thing I want to say. Often when I'm giving talks with school children, yeah, and somebody is standing there at the end and saying, "What message have you got? What message have you got for these youngsters?" I wonder what you would say. Has anybody got any ideas, please? Yeah.
There's hope for you.
Pardon? There's hope.
Be
Yeah.
kind.
Don't worry.
Be
there's hope.
kind.
Be kind. You've hit the nail on the head.
And don't be a bystander as well. When evil.
About to say that.
Sorry?
Don't be a bystander.
Yeah, when evil
Exactly. Don't be a bystander.
happens. Yeah.
Don't. Yeah? You see somebody in the road, don't stand there. Help.
Embrace differences.
Exactly. Acknowledge your differences. Acknowledge how prejudiced you are. And we are prejudiced. And soon as we acknowledge our prejudice and our dislike, then we can deal with it. But only then we can deal with it. Yeah? Whether it's colour, whether it's social class, whether it's religion, whatever it is. Soon as we realise within ourselves this is part of us, and it's a part of us that we don't like, part of me that I don't like, Then I can acknowledge it and I can do something about it. Also, I say to the youngsters, the future is not easy for you. The future is yours. It is on your shoulders to make a better world for the world you are going to live in. It is yours. Not an easy task, but I'm sure you'll be able to deal with it. Okay, I'm going to end there, otherwise I'll...
Thank you.
Right, shall we have a little... are you still alive? I would love just to have a 5 minutes rest, if you don't all go for the door. And then, in the meantime, if you want to talk amongst each other and relax, yeah? I would like a cup of tea.
Everybody else can have one too, but we can go first.
Then, please, I know the children, when I talked last time to 400 kids, it came to question time, you could have heard a pin drop. And I'm sure they would have had questions, but
Don't make another long speech.
no. I'm not gonna. I've just been told don't make another long speech. Please ask questions if you feel like it. Don't be shy to do that. Yeah? Okay. I'm going to have my tea now.
Thank you.
Relax.
Can I ask you a question? I've always been perplexed as to why the Jews throughout history have always been picked upon. And is it because they saw themselves as a race as well as a religion? Because there were the pogroms, the Middle Ages, the Egypt. It always seemed to be that they were being thrown out of somewhere. And I often think, has anybody ever come? Has anybody?
Can we answer it? Can we answer that question so that everybody might be able to hear the question and answer it when it comes to? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.